Hi, my name's Ian, and as promised, I'm going to do a little bit of a delve into Carl Sargent's sourcebooks for Greyhawk as a sort of an addendum to the View of the Iuz that we did on Greyhawk. It's a little bit unscripted, but we'll get through it. Now, Carl Sargent himself, as an author, is unfortunately no longer with us, but he did a fair amount of work in the RPG industry within the 90s, and I first came across him within the pages of White Dwarf. He also did some work for Dragon, and yeah, a very good writer, so I can understand why he ended up writing for TSR, and he did some modules and contributed to some source books, and he also was part of that second edition Greyhawk revival period. Probably the leading light with it. He wrote the From the Ashes campaign set, which was an updated version following the Greyhawk Wars. He also wrote one of the trilogy of adventures, or two adventures plus a board war game that describes that changeover between the traditional Greyhawk setting and the From the Ashes setting. And yeah, he also wrote some stuff for other games. He wrote some things for Shadowrun. He wrote a fair bit for the Warhammer fantasy role-playing game, and a few other odds and sods here and there. So yeah, now Night Below. He wrote Night Below. So if you're familiar with the super mega module campaign box set thing called Night Below, then that was one of his too. From Greyhawk's never really been traditionally one of those worlds that has garnered specific source books for its various bits. There are some notable exceptions to this, which include the three books that we're going to talk about here, and also there was Sean K. Reynolds wrote a source book for the Scarlet Brotherhood, and then aside from the Greyhawk City box set, that's kind of it. It's usually been a source book that has given you a general overview of the countries and nations and areas and everything else, and then it's left to the individual DMs to make it up as they're going along. So these books here are pretty much the exception to the rule when it comes to Greyhawk. So let's go and have a delve in it. There are three, but I'll go through each generally, bit by bit, rather than go, oh, here you go, here are the three we're talking about. So the first one that followed on, so the WGR series, this is WGR4. The WGR series was World of Greyhawk reference. It started off with WGR1, which was, might even have it floating around, can't remember. One of those that tends to live near my desk because I do a fair bit of tinkering with it now and again. But anyway, WGR1 was Greyhawk Ruins, which was the closest, I suppose, iteration to Gary Gygax's original World of Greyhawk, Greyhawk Dungeon, Greyhawk Castle Dungeon, that TSR ever got to. And WGR2 was a collection of short adventures, and WGR3 dealt with the wizard Rary and the Bright Desert. Then we got the From the Ashes box set, and then these three source books that then built on the information in those books in that campaign set. So WGR4 The Marklands. The Marklands deals with the state of the good nations following the Greyhawk Wars, and as we can see from the table of contents here, we've got Friondi, we have Nyrond, and we have High Folk. The weird thing for me is that for some reason the Marklands, this WGR4 one, is not on Drive-Thru RPG, and I don't know why, but it's a mystery. Whether they don't have the original files, I don't know. Anyway, published 1993. The highlighting is mine, by the way. So it basically just gives you an overview. It's very dense. Look, you can see that half the reason why I highlight stuff like this is that so you can pick out paragraphs that are important and need sort of extracting out and going through. But it basically describes the history of Furiondi. Most of it is about this is about Furiondi as per the battles, the Greyhawk Wars. There's a lot of bits going on from that, and then it goes into the actual description of how Furiondi works as a country. And you can see, I mean, it is absolutely dense in information. Then it breaks Furiondi down into the various baronies and gives you, this is on par with the breakdown of nations that you get in the top level Greyhawk sourcebooks. What it does, it actually breaks down. These tie into the map itself, so you've got all the various baronies are all mapped out, and a bit more information is given to each of the cartographical information. For example, on the top level one, you get Willip, you get Chendals on the top level map, and so on. But all of these little villages and things in between are not really mapped outside of this particular iteration. But there you go. This is the weird thing as well to me, from a map point of view. The original map of Greyhawk is broken down at 1 hex per 30 miles, right? So why then did they choose the 1 hex per 20 miles for the maps for these? I'm not entirely sure. I think that's a kind of bad choice. I think that it's better if you're going to go through a hex scale of things, then actually scaling things by the hex so that they fit. So you've got have I got any handy hex paper floating around? Right, back in the room. Okay, so this is what I kind of mean by this, right? So if you're going through a hex system of mapping, then it's easier to use something that breaks down logically. So if this was 30 miles, if you've got a 30 mile across here, right? Say that's 30. And then here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So each one of these then becomes 2 miles. Right? So from a big hex, if we're taken from the original map for the Greyhawk campaign map from the Ashes and from the original campaign setting, then you could do one of these little pages here with a 2 mile thing. So we just go, okay, so the coastline goes to here, and there's Chendal at the side, and there's a road, whatever. All right, so you've got that sort of logical breakdown. So when you zoom up or when you look at the campaign map, the hex resembles it, and then you sort of come down. And there are lots of different iterations of the way you can break down things like that. So if we've got a 30 mile hex going on here, I think it would be in the middle there. There you go. And then it would come down through the middle there, and it would come down. So you could break it down into that. So if we say this is your 30 mile, then each one of these, you've got 3 there, each one of these would be 10, right? So that works. That sort of works. But what you're going is from, on the campaign map we have a 30 mile hex, and on the more detailed maps we got 20 miles, and you're talking about a weird ratio that doesn't really doesn't really break down very easily. So I'm not sure why they chose a 1 hex to 20 miles. A good one, Mystara. When we get to Mystara, that's quite a good one because they use factors of 8 in most of the maps. So you've got 8-mile hexes, you've got 16-mile hexes, you've got 32-mile hexes, you've got 48-mile hexes, and you've got 96-mile hexes. But there and some maps, especially in modules and stuff like that, they then start introducing 3-mile hexes or 6-mile hexes, or it doesn't make it very easy for a game master who wants to try and go between different scales of maps and to actually scale up and scale down, or zoom in and zoom out on the actual maps themselves. So just a hint to anyone that plays around with hex maps or does anything where they want to actually do more detail or fill in more detail as they're going down, then try and stick to a coherent way of doing of zooming in and zooming out. And hex grids make it absolutely easy to do that. So choosing different random arbitrary scales for your hex maps don't do anyone any favours whatsoever. But anyway, that's by the by. So 20-mile hex scale, but it shows a little more detail, and that's fully on the and it ties into this particular bit here. So you've got here is a description. That's about all you'd get in the campaign setting. This is how it defends itself, because again, this is a lot coming from a wargaming or a war standing. The state of Greyhawk at this point is that the war has just finished, if you like, but it's like a cold war. It's all of the borders are very uneasy, and Furiondi is just over the road from Iuz, and Nyrond is just over the road from the Great Kingdom. So all of these very dodgy borders, no one's really stood down from that war footing. It's very dangerous. Quite a dark time for Greyhawk, actually. It paints a darker setting than the original set, and indeed from the later iterations where the Living Greyhawk and so on came in. So yeah, so a lot of stuff, some maps of places. This is all sort of source material for the actual bits itself. Then you've got some statistics for characters, non-player characters. And then you've got these breakdowns of the militaries that are involved. And again, this sort of ties back into looking at the war footing of the various nations involved, and painting it very much as a well, I suppose, following on from the Greyhawk Wars, the box set game, to tie in with Greyhawk as a wargaming world, a land, whatever, full of potential conflict. Okay, so that's pretty much, that's all about Furiondi, and then you get into High Folk, and it does pretty much the same for High Folk. So it gives you that population breakdown. There's a map of the Vespi, which is, they could have, you got this sort of, there's the Vespi on this map. So you got the breakdown of Furiondi on the colour map, but the breakdown of the Vespi, I don't know. I feel they could have filled in that detail on the colour map as well, rather than just leave it as a thing. It's the same scale. This overlays directly onto that. They're using that 20-mile hex scale. And similar again, so they break it down, they give you some geography things, they give you NPC characteristics and so on. But Vespi and High Folk's not particularly huge, so then we go on to Nyrond. And the colour map for Nyrond is on the other side. And there you go. Again, broken down. This area is all what used to be Elmore is kind of broken down into what's left within Nyrond, and then what's actually left in with the Great Kingdom. So yeah, the borders again. Over here, you've got detail on Nyrond itself. You've got not much detail with the lands that are beyond that. So I'm not sure if there was an intent to go and fill in some of the gaps like Ernst and so on, but it never did materialise. We'll talk a little bit more on that as we get through. So again, treats Nyrond in the same way, how it sort of works, how its relationships with the nations surrounding it, the factions, military things, breakdown of the lands. And you can see again, I'll reiterate the fact that these books are very, very densely written. There's not much in the way of illustration breaking things up. It's almost text all the way, and more breakdown, more breakdown, more breakdown, more breakdown, more breakdown. Character NPC statistics, and there you go. Right. So that's that's your Marklands. That's the first one in this particular series. So the second one in the series pretty much dealt with the opposite of Furiondi. So the opposite of Furiondi is across the border. You've obviously got Iuz. So Iuz's lands are broken down in this one, and we have similarly a colour map that breaks things down. So there's Furiondi at the bottom there. So this map is a lot larger because Iuz was the big winner really from the Greyhawk Wars. His lands, he took the Horned Lands. There's his own kingdom, the Horned Lands he managed to take, and then also all the way across to the north ends of Nyrond. So there you got Nyrond. Ten was taken, the Bandit Lands. All of this is what Iuz ended up with. So that's why it's quite a lot of details in here. Again, they're using that 20-mile hex scale for this, which is good. At least they stay consistent in the scale they're using between the source books themselves, or this particular set of source books, and what they're not doing is changing scales between them. They have changed key though. The style of map isn't the same, so it would have been sort of nice if they'd been able to dovetail into the maps from the Marklands. So that's the sort of map that we're looking at and the detail that we are going to be exploring, and that's it's a fair old chunk of land that Iuz is covering. So with history as well, it deals with the history of Iuz himself and the nature of Iuz. It gives you a bit on the priesthood of Iuz, some new spells for that priesthood, factions within the priesthood. It will give you, right, if anyone knows the, well, we'll come to that when we get to the NPC stats, but I'll go through that. And then descriptions of the various places. Iuz's homeland. The City of Skulls was actually, when we jump in things, so this is WGR5, so WGR4 was the Marklands, WGR5 was Iuz the Evil, which we're looking at here. WGR6 was the City of Skulls, which was an adventure. It wasn't really a source book, but it did delve into a bit more of a, like most adventures, when you start drilling down in and looking at a particular area in which the adventure is set, you then detail more of that area, and so it is picked up a bit more in WGR6, but that's mainly the focus of the adventure itself. So yeah, more stuff. Molag being the old capital of the Horn Society. and admin 4. Yeah, so I'm skipping through this quite a lot because, you know, it's basically for illustration of just how dense the actual the text work is. You know, few illustrations, quite a lot of text, quite a lot of detail, lots and lots of information. This is the counter to the military breakdowns that are in the Marklands. So we've got the breakdowns of the military forces of Iuz in various areas. There a bunch of stuff as well, but these NPCs. Now, if we go through, some of these you may know, like Null. If you're a Greyhawk fan, you've probably come across some of these characters before. But Vane, another one. Here we go. So we've got a description here of Obme. And so if you know the Giants series, Obme turns up in that. Gleed, and one of the ones that and Keek, right? So if you're familiar with some of the early Greyhawk modules, including like Against the Giants and that, and also with Gygax's Greyhawk novels, then these people, they turn up. Obme with his Ring of Regeneration, especially interesting thing, and Keek the Mad Elf. So it was nice to, having read those books back in the 80s and things, to actually have them finally pinned down in a source book. Anyway, Eclavdra in this instance. Anyway, that's utterly beside the point and nothing to do with what we're talking about on these. So yeah, there's Gratz. You know, is I believe his first appearance in second edition AD&D was here. But it's interesting to note that the reason why I brought that Gygax thing up, actually, now we've got Eclavdra and Gratz here, and why that goes through, is that these figures appeared in Gygax's books as well. This was almost like some author, Carl Sargent in this case, picking up and building the elements that Gygax had written into his Gord books, or at least those first two Gord books that were published by TSR, the later Gord books being published by New Infinities after Gygax had left TSR. But it's interesting that an author had actually picked up those elements that Gygax had been writing about in his novels and folding them in to an iteration of Greyhawk that followed Gygax's leaving TSR and all of that scenario. Anyway, okay, so there's Pazrael as well, another Demon Lord, probably first appearance in second edition, and that's it for that Iuz the Evil. Now, if you cast back and remember what I said about WGR6 being the adventure City of Skulls, that builds on the material in here, in this Iuz the Evil one. So the intent, I'm pretty sure, was to carry on dealing various bits and pieces. So another source book in the series was written by Carl Sargent, but didn't get to publication, wasn't released. TSR did release it as a free download, and then eventually someone tarted it up into a PDF, which unfortunately doesn't translate into a printable PDF for print on demand. So this is I've taken that fan-made PDF here, and I actually had to clean it up quite a lot in order to get it to be printable on print on demand. But anyway, I've had the basis of it for some time, and this video has basically been waiting on Lulu to deliver my print-on-demand version of it. So Ivid the Undying. So this then covers, it works in tandem with the Marklands and Iuz the Evil, and it really is a companion piece to the Marklands Nyrond section, where we're actually dealing with the Great Kingdom and its condition. The Great Kingdom pretty much collapsed following the Greyhawk Wars, and this is probably the darkest of the three books. I mean, when you're dealing with demons and evil and everything else, you're never going to, and post-war, all of that, you're never going to deal with a happy-go-lucky setting. But certainly a great kingdom that was ruled by a mad ruler to start with, and then collapsed, and the Ivid himself taking a turn for enjoying the company of undead nobles. So yeah, and various parts of the whole thing. Almor itself is utterly wrecked. So this is freely available on the internet. The PDF file that someone put together that this is based on. Like I said, the only changes I've really made to it are correcting some of the layout stuff, so to create a form that's print on, that can be used as print on demand. But the actual text itself has been made available from TSR right from about 94, 95, something like that. So, but yeah, written by Carl Sargent, and it is of the same sort of dense quality of writing, where you've got lots and lots. But obviously they didn't commission any artwork for this, so it doesn't. It's even worse. I mean, in my print-on-demand thing of it, we've got 140 pages, and they're pretty much just dense text. But it follows the same kind of line. So it follows the sort of outline of what the history of it, what it's like, what the Great Kingdom is like following its collapse after the Greyhawk Wars. And it breaks it down into the areas that are currently, all the different factional areas. Effectively, the Great Kingdom now comprises a number of self-governed states that the Overking, the eponymous Ivid, lays claim to as part of the Great Kingdom, but has no real control over, and they're being ruled by separate people. So you've got Rauxis in the lands of the Overking. They're the ones that he continues to stay in control of, Rauxis being the old capital. North Province, the Twin Cities, the Adri Forest. The Adri Forest not really it's more a region than an actual kingdom, but the Nalex lands, Sea Barrens, Free Cities, the ruins of Medigia, Grand Woods, Lone Heath, the lands of Darwin, South Province, the Western lands, the Almorian lands. That's what I was talking about when we covered on the Iuz the Evil, where you've got what was left of Almor split between Nyrond and the remnants of it. Almor was pretty much destroyed. And then this Forces of the Empire bit, which follows on from all the military descriptions that we got in previous books. So here you go. It is. The maps were put together. So there was obviously no poster map or anything like that, because someone... these are all sort of fan-made stuff based on sketches and everything else. Again, they're sort of images that are free. Who did it? Cartography, Kent Mathieson, John Knecht, and Michael Scott. So they weren't made for the book, but they were pieced together for the free release that TSR did. So to illustrate what was going on about. Like I said, it never actually reached publication. It's a shame. I wish they'd actually carried on with this line of Greyhawk, but it just seemed to die. I don't know whether it did that because it didn't sell at the time. You've got to remember, through second editions period, particularly this was like 92, 93, 94, during that period they had a lot of campaign settings they were introducing. Forgotten Realms was very strong. I didn't feel that Dragonlance was very strong. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it just felt that they were trying to kickstart it constantly, and then resetting back to the War of the Lance. But we'll cover Dragonlance in a separate view of my Birthright was going through, Spelldrammer, Dark Sun. So there's a lot of different campaign worlds they're going through, and whether Greyhawk was one that particularly sold very well or what, I'm not sure. For me, the From the Ashes sort of thing, the dark war-torn land edition of Greyhawk was quite. I quite liked it. I like the classic Greyhawk as well. They're my favourite editions. I'm not too keen on the later ones, like the third edition depiction of Greyhawk. I didn't feel that. I don't know why. Perhaps I just got too invested in this sort of era. But it was certainly a darker medieval setting than the Forgotten Realms, and from what Greyhawk had been previously. But yeah, you see these little inset maps. Inserted them in, did a bit more layout than the fan-made PDF. The fan-made PDF, by the way, if you go to RPG Geek and look up Ivid the Undying there, you can find all the original files in the PDF thing. I may load the PDF that I built this on. So my re-layout thing that works with print-on-demand services, I might load that up into RPG Geek as well, just for people to be able to create into a nice book. However, just be warned that I did cock up the crop marks on the the actual layout of the cover, and the AD&D logo got a bit sliced. It's a shame really, because if I'd thought about it a little bit more, there's plenty of space at the bottom. I could have just shifted the cover down a bit. But hey ho, that's my bad, and ultimately my book. But there you. It is what it is. Right, so all of these sections are all broken down in exactly the same way as they are through the other two books. So it's entirely of the same form as the others. Familiar setup, layout, and content, and so on. It's just a really another good book in the series, really, and just a shame that it was never published and the line was never continued on that regards. The next iteration of Greyhawk that we got was the Adventure Begins one. So this version of Greyhawk, which we've got a few, we've got Slavers, and we've got this thing on about the Scarlet Brotherhood, which, I think it kind of follows on a little bit. It's on a similar scale of writing to these ones, but I don't know. I don't think they do cover the Greyhawk Wars in these things, and they do sort of open things up a bit, but they focus much more on this city of Greyhawk and the actual central portion of Greyhawk, more so than the whole thing. So it's very much a more focused campaign rather than actually looking at the world. But it's all right. Yeah. So this is that you get a bit in the centre that's just about more that goes through. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes in there, builds on the material that's in Ivid the Undying. But without actually that book existing in a published format. So yeah, that's all they really got on the world. and the rest of it is more about the actual Greyhawk area. And the player's guide, you got the same map. Then you've got, that's the sort of map of the Flanais that they were working with on this. So very definitely not the Darlene map or an iteration of that. It doesn't really break into the same level of detail or what have you. So this sort of resembles a lot of the, I suppose, the glossography and the there's a bit about the gods and things like that, and gaming in it. And what have you got? And I never got on with these maps. I mean, this version of Greyhawk, if you like, it focused a lot on city maps like this, and I suppose they get a feel for it. And this is like an old way of mapping cities and everything else in this 3D thing. But to me, this is a nice way of showing things artistically, but it's not helpful from a game point of view. I suppose it depends on how you go through. And it would be nice for this to have been a second thing, a second sort of concept of that, but still have the top-down sort of more gamey, I suppose, map. But the gamey map of Greyhawk disappears. And if you look at there's bound to be a city maps in here somewhere, surely. Yeah, look. So this is the way that they went with maps of the cities from here on. All right. So in this particular iteration of Greyhawk, with this kind of boundary border to it, those were the way that city maps were presented. Whereas this sort of top-down, where can we get the map? There's a map of Chendal somewhere. I think it's the first one we end up to. Yeah, so this is the sort of, to me, more helpful. I don't know. Different folks have different strokes for different folks. There you go. It's whatever works for you, really. Right. So that's a pretty overview. Very kind of delve into the WG4, WG5, and WGR4, WGR5, and what I've called WGR7, but it never really got an official code because it was never really published. And that's the video. I can witter on for quite some time about Greyhawk and the various iterations of it, but I feel that's enough for this particular video. Right. Weirdly, right, so that available free. Go to RPG Geek or just search for the Undying or whatever, and you'll find the free files for that. That's on on Drive-Thru RPG, and that isn't anywhere. To some complete confusion of mine. It doesn't make sense for me to have this, but not its companion. But there you go. Authored all those three, authored by Carl Sargent, did a lot of work in the RPG industry, sadly no longer with us, but yeah, certainly check out some of the other things he's done, because he is one of the better writers in the world of, or that particular era of role-playing games. Alright, till we meet again, have a good week and take care.